A year ago, I had a look at my pile of opportunity on a video, that being all of the models that I have bought but haven't painted. Now there's a whole debate about pile of opportunity versus pile of shame, and I've weighed in on that more than once, so I'll skip that little discussion for today. But I thought it'd be interesting to have a look at how things have progressed from last year to today. So, hi, I'm ED-SKaR, and let's have a look at all of the models that I have but haven't actually painted yet. Last year I showed off these little egg carton lids, and they're a very convenient way for me to move the models around and keep them together and organised, so you'll be seeing them a lot throughout this video. And this first carton lid has some cowboys that we've been working on over on Back to the Brush podcast. Another carton has some dwarves, which you might remember from last year. I haven't actually played many RPGs, fantasy RPGs, so I haven't needed the dwarves, and so they've kind of languished. Next up is some more that I haven't looked at in over a year, and that's the Blackstone Fortress models that Ratman split with me. We're off to a good start. Let's break from the trend and have a look at some Stalker models. So this is another roleplay game or skirmish game setting that I really want to play some games in, because I love the Stalker computer games and the old film and Annihilation as well. If you haven't seen my little build on that a few months ago, Zona and other similar things. And I will interject from the editing table here, which is actually the same table as I recorded the episode on, but I forgot a few models, specifically the Zona board game. And there are 4 more models there. They don't go on the pile of opportunity because they actually stay with the board game, but I do need to paint them, and I will eventually paint them. But moving on, and next up is my Orcs. I used to play Orcs in Warhammer 40k, but honestly, 40k isn't a fun game anymore, and I'm not particularly interested in painting my 200th Orc for whatever reason. If I'm ever playing a science fiction game, maybe Shadowrun or something similar, and I need an Orc with a machine gun, well, I've got dozens of those, and I don't need another. And I've got bikers and jetpacks and ones with silly axes. I have no impetus to paint the rest of my Orcs. And so is there a reason to keep them? And that's a good question that I need to answer for myself to work out what I'll do with these models. Do I sell them on? Do I give them away? Do I maybe paint them and then sell them? Only time will tell, and I haven't figured that one out just yet. But the biggest model in both my Orcs and my entire pile of opportunity is this Orc Stomper. Now, as you can see, I've done a lot of work in cleaning up the build, gap filling and all of that kind of stuff, and I've had a decent attempt at starting the painting, but I'm kind of stumped on it. I can't figure out what's missing from the paint scheme. It's pretty much all green at the moment, and so I need something that's not green. I'll figure it out eventually, and I will get this one done. As we're dragging along a bit, let's skip through a few quite quickly. I've got some Battle Sisters here, shown in a box last year, so I've at least built them, plus 2 extras, just need to paint them. I've got a whole collection of 3D printed models. I've got some Goobers, some Alucard, aerial drones, Alice, Batman, and a bundle of cyberpunk trench coats, and that sort of thing. Now, I have painted a lot of 3D printed models, so these aren't just being ignored. I'm not printing them and piling them up, but just the odd one here or there is a test model or something that doesn't capture my interest once it's built. Also, here are the Frostgrave Mountain Women. Many of these were in the box last year, so I've built them up, and I have painted a few, but there's plenty more to go. And while it looks like I went out of frame with my time-lapse here, a variety of metal models. There's Wreckage, Bad Squiddo Games, and Hassle Free. There's a couple from War Machine as well, and they are really cool models. I have the habit of buying the odd group of models, the odd squad here or there, 2 or 3, that I think are very interesting. I also particularly enjoy painting cast pewter models. I personally find that paint just flows onto a metal model in a more enjoyable way, a more smooth way than it does onto plastic or resin. And even over primer and multiple layers of paint, that still holds true. Cracking on, I do have a lot of fantasy models as well, even though science fiction is usually my area. The Last Knights from my Bretonnian army, which I've had for some time, but somehow didn't manage to make the count last year. the last of my Lord of the Rings models, the skeleton statue from the Age of Sigmar mausoleum, and just a lot of generic warriors from various factions and with various weapons. And yes, those playing cards are a perfect fit for Alice. Off with her head. At this point I'm freeing up the larger models from the back of my shelf, so we're coming close to an end. I have an Orc truck, a Colony Orc Viper, and an Eldar Viper, which is actually missing some parts, as well as a Dragon. And that is a whole bunch of models, but there's still a few that I haven't mentioned yet. Because I'm working on 2 separate armies at the moment, and I've been working on them for a few months, it does take its time to paint a large army of models. And the first of those, which will come as a surprise to no one, is my Gaunt's Ghosts army for Warhammer 40k. And I'm also building a Soviet army for Bolt Action, and I'm speed painting most of this army because this army is for gaming and not for looking good. And over here at the end of the table is a box that I found this last year, something that I've had for quite some time, and again, didn't mention it in the video last year, but this is my Airfix collection. There are 10 Airfix vehicles in here, mostly in the 1/72 scale, which is not a scale I usually work with, but it might be interesting to build some stuff in a more finely detailed scale than what I'm used to. Wargaming models tend to be a little more robust. Well, I did spend a few minutes in between takes here to reorganize everything on the table, and so I should look over the last year to see how many models I've actually painted in comparison to how many models I still have. Now, keeping track of exactly how many models I've painted over the year would be a bit of a chore, and trying to remember how many I've painted is going to be unreliable, especially with my poor memory. But I've actually been keeping track of things on Back to the Brush podcast, where every month we have a little section where we talk about the models we've made and painted, and so all I have to do is to go back and look through that and count them up. And I realised that even that I'm not keeping track perfectly, but I came to roughly a total of 191 models painted this year. And that's better than one every other day, and that's not bad at all. But just before I let slip how many models I have currently, I have a little caveat to place on last year's count of 160. The Airfix models, which I'm counting as 10 because I'm not counting those infantry because there's no chance I'm painting them, don't like painting them, but the 10 models there, I had them last year but they weren't in the count, so they're not a new purchase. And it's the same story with these 4 Knight models and all of the Gretchen and Snots. And so the numbers don't necessarily match up from last year to this year. It's just what I'm saying, and I'm hoping that will be generous in making me not look like a hoarder. So let's go through the numbers. Last year's count was 161 models, which maybe should probably have been 180 or 190. I have painted roughly 190 models this year. And my current pile of opportunity rings in at 307. Somehow. Which is quite surprising. How did I end up with an extra 300 models this year? Now, assuming my counting is even remotely correct, 190-ish that I had last year, 190-ish that I've painted should come to 0, maybe plus or minus 20. So where did these 307 come from? The Soviets come to, I think, 70 or 80 models, if you include all the extras that I've 3D printed, which I should, actually. The Tanith First and Only, a lot of them have been given, but that comes to 70 or 80, so that's 150. We're halfway there just on those 2 armies. But how did I nickel and dime my way to that other 150 models? I've got 5 cowboys, half of the box because I gave some to Ratman. I've got the 10 models from the Zona board game. I've got 6 models from the Kings of War Armada. And there's just the odd ones here or there from Bad Squid Games, from House of Free. How did it get to 150? Well, overall, I think I stand by what I said last year, that the models I'm buying, printing, or otherwise acquiring are the models that I'm excited with actually painting, and so I am painting them fairly quickly, meaning that most of my pile of opportunity is not models that I've gone out to buy excited to get and then put them aside when the next shiny thing comes out. but rather bits and pieces of sets that I drift in between, painting the odd model here or there as the mood arises. Even the Orcs, which I admit are the ones I'm least interested in, I've painted quite a few of them on and off video during the year. And I've got a whole bunch of the 3D printed stuff that I've painted as well. Well, all told, my 307 models will keep me going for some time, so I'd probably best get back to painting. Please leave a comment if there's some model you've seen here that you'd like me to work on, and share the video with anyone who you'd feel needs some encouragement about painting, because they enjoy painting. Painting is fun, and having a pile of shame shouldn't get in your way of painting, but rather your pile of opportunity is a required supply to paint models, because you can't paint models if you don't have any models. And while I make these videos as a hobby, some people have asked to directly support me, so there is a donation link in the description if you would like to help out. I'll eventually buy a proper camera. But with all that said, I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.